Hey, all right. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back to another late show with your host, Young Brando. We're going to talk about watches. I'm coming to you live from Los Angeles. AP is not relenting. They are really riding hard on that wave of the 50th anniversary still of their iconic model. We're in 2023 now. They have other anniversaries to celebrate. They have other points to make in terms of how they sustain a tradition of innovation. And it's really exciting. Look, even I have to eat my crow, so to speak. Uh, it still doesn't tickle my fancy, especially since I'm not in the market for a watch that costs $1.5 million. But the way they put that new code 1159 Universel RD4 together is really impressive. The way that that piece, with its 40 functions and 23 complications, honors the centerpiece of their museum, of their Musée Atelier in Le Reçu. I think that's a great um, that's an amazing thing to do. That's really incredible way to begin the 2023. I think it's really impressive. In the thumbnail, you have seen the 4 different iterations of this watch, but I will start with talking about the pocket watch a little bit to have a little bit of head start on the topic and to get the juices flowing and to get the stream flowing a little bit, no pun intended. But I have my 1 minute take on this, on AP's tradition of innovation. So if you would like to listen to it at some other point, if you're looking for the kind of content that you would share with your friends, that you can use to spread the word about the channel, this is exactly that. I do a lot of these in the 5 minute format, in the 10-15 minute format, uh, but increasingly I'm going to try to do these with 1 minute things as well. I did a quick take on Tudor as a brand, where it looks like I'm speaking 3 words per beat. I know it's not very flattering, but still, you gotta try. You gotta really try hard to squeeze in so many words into a single minute. Sometimes I gave my shot, so check it out and share it if you can. I would really appreciate it. Um, so we are talking about the new releases by Audemars Piguet, specifically starting with the Universel, which is one of the most complicated watches ever made. Um, of course, one of the first things that you will notice about this watch, which will give you an idea about the actual place of German watchmaking and Glashütte in the entire industry, but we will come back to that. It's that name you have right at the center of the watch. But this was basically a pocket watch that uh, was created in 1899, and it is a watch. It's a pocket watch that Audemars Piguet calls the Universel, and it is actually held today as one of those most significant pieces that they have ever produced and that they have had a hand in producing in their museum. And one of the most beautiful things about that museum is its architecture, right? Because literally, yes, it has the watches at its center. Its primary purpose is to exhibit timepieces from the archive of Audemars Piguet in the way that most horological museums dedicated to brands do, but it also looks right into a part of their manufacture, right? Hence, atelier, right? So I think it's an amazing design. If you ever find yourself in Switzerland anytime soon, if you find yourself in Geneva anytime soon, I think it's about an hour of a drive away from there, and you have to book a place. You have to book an appointment ahead of time, I think. But anyway, I mean, it's in the Vallée du Joux. It's in basically the ancestral home of Swiss watchmaking, and it is, it's close to some other interesting manufacturers in Le Sentier, namely Jaeger-LeCoultre. So it could be a cool place to visit. So basically, AP is also a custodian of some of the best watchmaking traditions of Vallée du Joux, and that's something that can get lost in their own marketing drivel, that can get lost in their single-minded focus on the Royal Oak. That can get lost in the cringy ostentation of their CEO and some of their collectors, honestly. And frankly, from my own experience, I can admit it's not pleasant at all as a new customer, as someone who does not have a spending history with them, to go into an Audemars Piguet boutique. But I can't help and still respect the kind of role they have played in this heartland of Swiss watchmaking, and the way they still do. I mean, until 2000, for example, when Richemont acquired Les Manufactures Horlogères, LMH, which held in its umbrella, under its umbrella, IWC, Lange, and also Jaeger-LeCoultre, they had to buy a significant stake of Jaeger-LeCoultre from Audemars Piguet, because they literally had held on to a piece of that other heritage manufacturer, partly, of course, because it was a manufacturer that made so many important calibers, so many watch movements for them over the years, especially the caliber that AP calls 2021, which was the beating heart of the Royal Oak up until 2022, up until last year, up until the 50th anniversary. But I think that in and of itself was also a solid expression of AP's commitment to heritage watchmaking in Vallée du Joux. And again, I think as futuristic as this particular watch looks, I'm talking about the Code 1159, especially in its skeletonized form here in the research and development for Universal version. It is actually an expression of those traditions that Audemars Piguet held on to, that they have also nourished and sustained, and that they are trying to carry forward in ways that they deem appropriate. This was basically a complication that was made again at the turn of the 19th century by Audemars Piguet, which they delivered to a German watchmaker in Dresden, namely Dürstein and Company. And it was basically Uhrenfabrik Union Glashütte that assembled or encased the watch, hence the name, the branding on the dial. And as you can see, the Universaluhr, which was at that time produced, or at least encased, finished in Germany, disappeared from public consciousness for quite a bit. From 901, AP's website informs us the watch appeared in the German press under the name Universaluhr, basically made by the Glashütte Uhrenfabrik Union, right? The watch manufacturer Union in Glashütte. It remained in their catalog until the 1920s, and after that, the watch disappeared. And in 1993, the watch makes a surprise comeback in Sotheby's auction, right? An ultra complicated pocket watch. A British collector ends up getting it because he was a collector of AP vintage watches. And then, you know, something that we would perhaps today consider blasphemy, that person gets the movement reset in a platinum case, gets the dial customized, and it takes until after Audemars Piguet to reacquire the watch from this collector and restore it in a process that extends over a few years, even 4 years. And the watch is then put into this pink gold case that resembles its original encasing. And again, this is a piece that combines a lot of the complications that were just introduced in this piece, which I think retails right around 1.4 million in Swiss francs in this particular iteration, and 1.6 in the skeletonized versions. And among other things, the watch has a flying tourbillon at 6 o'clock. It is also a split seconds chronograph with a flyback function. And the split second actually can be independently operated from the main chronograph hand, which is quite impressive. So it does more than just catching up. And it has, of course, the 2 digits year display there, the leap year indicator, all the usual snazzy things that come with a perpetual calendar, which this watch also is. There is grand date, so to speak, a double-digit indicator for the date at 12 o'clock. But most importantly, the watch is also a chiming watch, right? Which means that it has all these functions of grande sonnerie and petite sonnerie, which you can keep on or off. Of course, that's unlike, let's say, how do we put this? So under the general category of the chiming watch, if you're familiar with it at all, you would be familiar with something called a minute repeater. Those watches usually have either a slider or some kind of pusher on one of the flanks of the case, which the wearer, which the user can operate. And when that slider or when that pusher is engaged, the minute repeater on demand will chime the hour, the quarters, and the minutes. A grande sonnerie or petite sonnerie is usually a continuous function of the watch, which you can turn on or off. And you can switch between the modes of grande sonnerie and petite sonnerie, which the first one, the former, grand, strikes the hours and the quarters in passing. And the petite sonnerie just strikes the hours in passing. And you can also turn it to silent, of course. So this particular watch has all of those complications and more. And it packs everything together in a very impressive package. It also has what AP calls super sonnerie, which is their technology of a particular kind of encasing that allows the watch to sound much more clearly and loudly. Hey, Van Lux, how are you doing, man? Nice to see you. Thanks for dropping by. But the interesting thing about this watch is it has kind of half hunter case-like expression. Usually, Audemars Piguet's chiming watches that have this super sonnerie, I guess, treatment, usually have a closed case back, whereas in this particular version, they have basically given the wearer the option to actually look at the movement, which is quite lovely. Let's see if I can find this on their website. I should. I think it's there, but that's when it's being put together. All right, it's right here. So in fact, you can actually glimpse at the movement by opening up this case back. So, you know, that inspiration of the universal pocket watch, of the universel, is actually also perhaps expressed in this particular way, where you have a half hunter case back as well. So basically, they will have 4 references in this series, 2 with white gold cases, and with either the black galvanic gold or opaline beige dial. So this is the black. I think the opaline beige, let's see, I think it was displayed somewhere here already. Maybe we need to go back to their first page. Yeah, this, it's a little bit too fancy, the web page, I think. But it's quite impressive, I have to admit. But please skip the introduction so I can actually see the watch for myself. All right, so there we go. This is the opaline dial. This is the white gold with the skeletonized two-tone dial. This is the black galvanic. And there's also a pink gold skeletonized with a two-tone dial as well. Of course, these are thick boys, but I think at 42 millimeters and with that kind of case, if you can sign a check for $1.5 million or more, I'm sure they will prove quite wearable. And remember, I mean, in general, creating even a chiming watch that is wearable is quite a huge challenge. So for something like this, that has literally 40 different functions and 23 legitimate horological complications, to actually step beyond being simply a concept watch and become something uniquely and seriously wearable, I think that's an achievement in and of itself. And the thickness is 15.5, basically. So it's less than 16 millimeters, 15.55. So it's quite impressive indeed, and I think it's a great expression of how they see themselves as the custodian of the best watchmaking traditions of Switzerland, of Vallée du Joux in particular, even as they continue to find ways to move that tradition forward. I think that's an admirable effort. Obviously, they are still trying their best to hype up the code 1159 as a line, right? We all know, I've mentioned this many times before, a lot of these sorts of watches, these sorts of stratospherically priced watches that I present on this channel are not even necessarily made to be sold. We talk a lot about flexing in terms of the collectors and people who wear watches. We talk quite a bit about flex culture, but you have to realize that's not something that simply occurs on an individual level. The brands themselves, and especially established manufacturers that have hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition, oftentimes produce these kinds of watches, pour money into research and development projects, that don't necessarily return to them immediately in terms of uh, uh, financial outlay, but it will actually be much more legitimate than any absurd marketing ploy that might, at the same price or perhaps sometimes more, put that same watch on a celebrity's wrist. So rather than doing something like that, you have to admire that they would rather pour that sort of resource into a kind of research and development that at once honors something from their archive and tries to draw attention to a suffering line in their catalog by showing you its utmost potential, by stretching it to the very limits of horological effort. So this is a watch that was very much like the Omega's chrono chime Speedmaster, right? Which is again, when I say these watches are not made to be sold, I'm not necessarily saying that there won't be a single buyer for them. You would be surprised, and I'm sure a lot of you may actually know collectors like that. Some of you may be collectors like that. I'm not contesting the fact of people actually acquiring these watches, but that's almost secondary. By the way, I'm just realizing that I embarrassed myself. What I called the leap year indicator is actually the moon phase. So my apologies. You have at 4 o'clock there in the Code 1159 Universal watch the two-digit expression of the year, and then at 6 o'clock you have the moon phase indicator, which is actually kind of cool. They are flanking the um, they're flanking the flying tourbillon, and overall, I think, especially in the skeletonized, you get kind of a Mickey Mouse silhouette or symbol, which I kind of like. That would be, as much as I like Sharajanta, this would be a Mickey Mouse watch I can get behind, rather than pieces that depict his likeness on the dial, literally. Yeah, again, I mean, this looks like an amazing piece, as unattainable as it is, as much of a um, publicity exercise that it seems. It is one horologically impressive marketing ploy, and you have to tip your hat to something like this. I mean, it's an unbelievable piece. And this is what they're talking about, right? Miniaturization and complication. This is longish video, so I will continue to talk about it. But that's what remains very impressive, right? For Patek Philippe to have established themselves in this way, they did in 1941 the 1518, right, in serial production, which was the very first perpetual calendar chronograph to be made in serial production, right? And that feat was about shrinking such a combination of two prestige complications in a case that was basically 35 millimeters, right? Rather than a pocket watch that you would hold in your hand and would have, like, let's say, a 46 plus millimeter diameter. Whereas, we talk a lot about F. Jean these days, and for all kinds of reasons. But what really put him on the map, horologically speaking, was to implement the phenomenon of resonance in a wristwatch, right? That was barely 40 millimeters in diameter, whereas Piguet centuries ago had implemented it in a pocket watch that was 60 plus millimeters in diameter. So miniaturization, as it were, as Monsieur Vivas talked about early in this video, is practically much more impressive. It will remain more impressive than any bulky, muscular watch, to me at least. It's always much more important to make a complicated watch simple, to make a complicated watch smaller than it used to be, than people are used to. So when it comes to this particular piece, something that has 23 complications and 40 different functions, for them to genuinely fit that into a 42 millimeter case that is a little over 15 millimeters thick, that's pretty impressive. I mean, just for comparison's sake, right? People complain a lot about how thick the Black Bay Pro is, and that's almost 15 millimeters thick, right? And that's just a GMT function. As much as I love that watch, and as much as I don't really mind thickness in watches, not that much, anyways. You have to understand, right? You have something obviously, mass produced, still very stylized, still very desirable, still a damn good watch that offers you, about 4 different functions in one neat package, 39 millimeters, almost 15 millimeters thick. And then you have this level of horological achievement, which, however it's priced, however unattainable it is to 99.99% of us, is a demonstration of how much utility, even function and complication, you can squeeze in to the smallest real estate as humanly possible. It's quite amazing just for that. I want to welcome more people who are in the chat. Van Lux says you still there, but well, I mean, you are really on my case sometimes, Van Lux. I like it. You keep me honest. Sometimes I, since I run the show completely on my own, and I don't want to go into amateur hour or all the time, I have to pull up the YouTube screen and mute myself and mute that and come back to the stream. So it happens. I apologize. Thomas, nice to see you, man. Ozzy, thanks for reminding everyone to upvote. I appreciate you. Van Lux says that's thicker than a Snicker. Yes, and you can't even eat it, so that's pretty frustrating. But it is it's still pretty lovely watch. Again, that's that particular version, the RD4 Universel, is far from the entry, but that is expressed in that new case, which is kind of a three-piece expression with a mid case and two parts basically snapping onto it. I call it exoskeleton. I don't even know if that's technically the right term or not, but hey. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't even know. I don't even think they will end up selling 15 of these, to be honest, Thomas. But Van Lux says, only Tudors I like are the old Submariners. I like the, hey man, I I like the Black Bay 58, honestly. There are a few other Tudors that I like, but the original Black Bay 58 with um that basically looks like the big crown Submariner. You know, like the good old 6538, one of the Bond watches. That's the one that I actually like quite a bit. Yeah, just the original piece. Let me pull it up just so we are on the same page. And of course, that basically looks exactly like Big Crown Submariner, right? With the gilt dial and the red triangle at 12 o'clock or minutes 60 on the rotating bezel. And of course, the oversized crown that gives the watch itself the name without crown guards, quite naturally. Yeah, that's the kind of an OG Bond watch as well. So very well cherished by the community, and I don't think it was a coincidence that the entire lineup, but especially this watch, was a huge hit for Tudor ever since it came out. And it's hard to believe, but it only existed since 2018. I mean, again, it's the way they came leaps and bounds just in that short period, and really the way they asserted themselves in this space in about a decade of their revival is quite impressive. And since I just saw Aussie Expat Watches in my chat, he has done a great video, which I'm sure some Omega fans won't appreciate, but he makes a very important point there, where Omega, for example, has gone through price increase after price increase, and puts out these models that offer very little in terms of horological improvement, yet carry such premiums precisely because Omega predicts that they will be hyped by the market, or they would be of interest to certain kinds of hyper collectors. His examples are like the special / limited editions of S&P 300s for the Bond franchise, or like the Silver Snoopy Award Speedmasters, which carry thousands of dollars of premium, and don't necessarily offer any added value except for the hype, except for the exclusivity. And he goes on to say that he would much rather direct someone who is coming into the hobby at that segment, you know, $3,500 to $5,000. He would rather push them to tutor. And you know, some of the comparisons are a little harsh. Uh, some of his judgments are a little too severe from my perspective, because I still like Omega to an important extent as a heritage brand. But anyway, it's still, he's still pretty good. So check out Aussie Expat watches, and his most recent video on Omega is, are they actually expensive? And as you know, Aussie Expat watches has been one of my featured channels for the longest time. So please, if you support me, support him as well. Please subscribe to his channel. There is some overlap, but I think he produces a very different kind of content. Except, of course, he does bring the analytical approach that he brings to this channel as well. So anyway, that's my love and regards and respect for Aussie Expat. Right. So the second AP watch that I wanted to discuss is this another piece, basically, that is in their RD line, in their research and development line. Of course, the RD2 came out a few years ago by now. I think almost 5 years ago. And it was basically their ultra thin perpetual calendar. But when it came out then, it was a piece they had encased in platinum. It's not, is it not here yet? It was a piece they had encased in platinum. And when it first came out, the RD2 was the thinnest perpetual calendar in the world, because the case was only 6.3 millimeters thick, and the movement itself less than 3, I think somewhere around 2.8 or 2.9. This year, as part of the novelties, they made this watch in titanium. I can't seem to find it on their page, though. I guess it must be buried somewhere. So hopefully I'll not have to crib it from some other watch channel, but let's see, or watch outlet, I should say. I never really go after other channels, but I do sometimes, as you guys know, pull up some content, of course, always giving due credit from established journalistic outlets. But let's see if we can find this new perpetual calendar RD2, new ultra thin perpetual calendar in platinum. Sorry, in titanium now. That is the exact point. And no, I don't think they have it properly on their website yet. So we'll have to go to the good old Hodinkee. So this is the piece. It's 41 millimeters, as with a lot of the more contemporary Audemars Piguet perpetual calendars. It's all executed wholly in grade 5 titanium, and preserves that iconic visual aesthetic that we associate with Royal Oak, which obviously depends on this sharp contrast between mirror polished edges with largely brushed grain surfaces. I guess the only thing that this ultra thin perpetual calendar lacks is the weekly calendar function that again the most recent generation of Audemars Piguet perpetual calendars express on the rejo of the watch. Of course, that would have increased the thickness, so that is not there. But otherwise, with the moon phase at 12 o'clock, which I think is the ideal position, you also have the leap year right there embedded into or tagged onto the month indicator at 3 or month subdial at 3. You have the night and day AM PM indicator, the 24-hour indicator tagged onto the day of the week, and you have the date at 6 o'clock. Amazing piece. You have that smoked blue sunburst dial, and the ultra thin piece is only 6.3 millimeters. A self-winding ultra thin perpetual calendar in titanium, which makes it all the more dramatic, of course, right? That it must be light as a feather. The reference number in this case is QP 26586TI. So Royal Oak Cancien Perpetuel 26586TI. That gradient sunburst dial again, that fades into black on the periphery. Caliber 5133, which was again the first, at the time of its release 5 years ago, the thinnest perpetual calendar caliber in the world, and the thinnest perpetual calendar was therefore this particular piece. I think Bulgari outdid AP, not too long after. But nevertheless, this is still an incredibly impressive watch. Apparently released in a limited edition of 200 pieces. I think, the price is 137,000 Swiss francs. Which honestly, speaking of which, and in the world of these ultra hyped APs, that doesn't sound that outrageous, but of course, hey, that would kind of start you up with a mortgage, almost in a non-metropolitan area in the US. Thomas, you know that I have so much to say on this. I won't pour out that kind of negativity on this particular stream. But let's put it like this. I have listened to a lot of interviews over the years with their current CEO, who is going out by the end of the year. And Code 1159 is something that came out under his leadership, under the leadership of François-Henri Benamias. So Benamias very openly said even the name was invented for the social media age, right? They wanted to have a name that's catchy, that's something that was something born as a hashtag, as it were, right? So 1159, you know, code 1159 was invented to be a social media hashtag in the first place. And I think, honestly, a lot of the initial negative reaction that perhaps in certain cases was a little bit out of proportion actually helped them and not hurt them, if you ask me. The problem with this watch is, again, from my point of view, is that it is derivative, right? The idea, for me, the idea AP represents, as I've been trying to say since the beginning of this particular stream, is that they have they stand for mechanical innovation, for sure. They stand for horological invention, for sure. They have, over the years, especially since the second half of the 20th century, also put themselves on the map for a unique design ethos. Do credit on all those accounts. But for me, as much as all of that, AP stands out as a custodian of a certain artisan watchmaking tradition, right? So for that brand that has so much originality in terms of design, so much authenticity in terms of their horological brand. God knows I hate living in a big city, but can't escape it for some reason. Going back, for a brand that has so much horological innovation, for a brand that so much authenticity in terms of their horological cred, and so much originality in terms of their design, to produce code 1159, which is so derivative that people keep calling it a mall watch, fashion watch. And look, the expression is harsh, but you have to understand the reason people think it is a mall watch is because at first blush, that design looks like it has been cribbed from 5 different sources, right? And that's what some fashion companies do, right? By copying a few different things that they think are cool about some watches that are hyped up, and put it together, slap their own branding to it, and release it at a huge markup. And frankly, that's what I think AP has exactly done for code 1159. At the entry level, it's an uninspired and uninspiring design that has elements of H. Moser, De Bethune, JLC Polaris, and finally AP itself with that octagonal mid case. And for a watch that's supposed to offer an alternative to the Royal Oak, that's supposed to be not Royal Oak, to be octagonal, at least as part of it, at least at the center of its element, it just doesn't make sense. But hey, whatever it is, I'm not huge on it. I'm much more interested, again, in the kind of horological innovation they start putting on it. Of course, I'm impressed, but AP can do it and do it even better in different instances as well. And the RD2 is a great example of that, which is something they had released previously in platinum, and which is something they release now in titanium. And it seems even more befitting to use this material for an ultra thin watch, since it would be light as feather. really amazing. Of course, this 26586 Ti is priced at 137,000 Swiss francs in a limited run of 200 pieces. The movement itself, caliber 5133, is less than 3 millimeters thin, and the case itself is 6.2 millimeters thick only. And that's basically 3 millimeters less than the average Audemars Piguet perpetual calendar. So it's quite a significant improvement. Okay, we have another interesting release here from Zodiac watches. You remember we talked about Zodiac in the last few weeks because they had come out with a model in collaboration with friends of the channel, Rowing Glazers, Eric Wind and Jack Carlson. But today we are actually going to talk about their new GMT watches that have this world time ring. I think for quite some time, their Zodiac's GMT watches were offered only in limited editions, and they have recently introduced these models to their lineup, which you will see in their GMT series. And you had two options, basically a two-tone version with a black dial, and in both cases you had a rotational 24-hour bezel, which incidentally looks more like an original Rolex Explorer 2 bezel, reference 1655, rather than a GMT master bezel, perhaps, but this one is, of course, rotational rather than fixed, as is the case in Rolex's Explorer 2. Now they came out with these two models that are actually limited editions as well, and they both have these sunburst dials. One is like a silver sunburst, and the bezel actually has 24 global cities for the 24 time zones, which is an interesting take. Of course, ultimately, the watch is simply a GMT watch, right? We don't have a world time complication for what it's worth. And also, we have a so-called collar GMT movement, which means that the 24-hour hand can be adjusted independently, but the hour hand, the main hour hand, cannot be used as a jump hour, right? Which in real GMT movement operated watches, such as the Rolex GMT Master 2, you actually can do that. So in fact, in terms of the functionality of the movement, this watch would not be much different than those new Seiko sports 5 GMT line, which has a very attractive price point of $500. I'm talking about the SSK series. Of course, you might like the styling of this piece a little better. You might say this is a Swiss-made piece rather than a Japanese-made piece, and you might prefer that. More power to you. But ultimately, what I mean to say is whether you have a Seiko collar GMT movement in combination with a rotational bezel, or the Soprod C125 here, which is also collar GMT movements, here used in combination with a World Time Cities ring, 24 city ring, you'll still have the same functionality. If you like the aesthetics of a Zodiac watch, for example, this one has that lovely silver dial in combination with the red cities ring on the rotational bezel, and you have the gray dial, kind of like a charcoal gray dial in combination with black. These are fine watches, again, for people who like Zodiac watches as an aesthetic, people who like perhaps the rather ingenious expression of the 24-hour ring as a cities ring rather than simply 24 hours might go towards this. But I think the price point for a collar GMT, when you start going above 1500, it becomes a little bit questionable for me. But that's just me. And I have to remind you also, I have presented just a couple of weeks ago another GMT piece, which has kind of its unique attraction, right? Because it's a 36 millimeter case. And that piece had the same movement as well. This is what the Emergent watch brand Lorca calls their model number 1. It's a piece that's actually it is a pretty close call to the Zodiac Super Sea Wolf, as it were, because it is just like it, 200 millimeters water resistant, just like the Zodiac Super Sea Wolf World Timer / GMT. It has the Soprod C125 movement, but its current pricing, at least in the pre-order range, is $1,450. So if you're looking for like a reduced sized GMT watch with a high depth rating, 200 meters specifically, and with a little more of a vintage aesthetic, this is a great option. But of course, the Zodiac is a little more butch, a little more futuristic, perhaps. Even though, of course, Zodiac is itself a brand that has some history behind it. So you basically have the Seiko 5 Sports GMT at around $500. You have the Zodiac limited edition Super Sea Wolf GMT World Time at $1,795. And you have the Lorca model number 1 GMT at $1,450. at least for about another 30 days. But that's something that won't be delivered until November. So, buyer beware. Oh my God, I'm sorry about this. The pre-orders apparently didn't even open for the Lorca, but anyway, so you'll have that open in about a month on March 7th, and then that pricing will remain until April 4th, where it will basically catch up to the Zodiac. So if that's an option for you, if that's something interesting for you, um, that's something you can keep an eye on. I mean, I like the fact that it exists. Honestly, this is not the watch for me, but I kind of like the aesthetics. Again, I think it's too expensive for what it is, but you got to commend people for putting something interesting out there, putting something new out there. You got to commend the chutzpah, so to speak, to put yourself out there with a new watch brand, as if there aren't enough of them already. And in this case, at least there's something new and unique about it, which is the reduced case size of 36 millimeters. All right, so let me just take a short break. I will leave you with my silly little short video, 1 minute, which you can listen to ad infinitum. Um, in the meantime, feel free to hit the like button. Feel free to send in any watch related questions with a super chat. And enjoy yourself. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. He sees itself as the custodian of some of the best watchmaking traditions in Vallée du Joux, as well as an innovator. This is something best enshrined in their Musée Atelier in Le Précieux, which, as its name indicates, is at once a workshop and a museum. The centerpiece of this museum is a pocket watch called the Universelle, which is one of the most complicated watches ever made. AP has just recreated this watch in their new Code 1159 RD4, which is a mechanical watch that has 40 functions and 23 complications. For the 30th anniversary of the Beast, they have just released the Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph, a faithful reproduction of the model first introduced in 1993 and designed by Emmanuel Guilly. The Offshore, in its turn, was a variation of the original 1972 design by Gerard Gentin. Here's a Royal Oak Jumbo made for the 20th anniversary of the model, entirely executed in platinum. And here's an 18-karat white gold version with the Tuscan dial, just introduced as part of the 2023 novelties. AP sees itself as the custodian of some of the best watchmaking traditions in Vallée du Joux, as well as an innovator. This is something best enshrined in their Musée Atelier in Le Précieux, which, as its name indicates, is at once a workshop and a museum. The centerpiece of this museum is a pocket watch called the Universelle, which is one of the most complicated watches ever made. AP has just recreated this watch in their new Code 1159 RD4, which is a mechanical watch that has 40 functions and 23 complications. For the 30th anniversary of the Beast, they have just released the Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph, a faithful reproduction of the model first introduced in 1993 and designed by Emmanuel Guilly. The Offshore, in its turn, was a variation of the original 1972 design by Gerard Gentin. Here's a Royal Oak Jumbo made for the 20th anniversary of the model, entirely executed in platinum. And here's an 18-karat white gold version with the Tuscan dial, just introduced as part of the 2023 novelties. AP sees itself as the custodian of some of the best watchmaking traditions in Vallée du Joux, as well as an innovator. This is something best enshrined in their Musée Atelier in Le Précieux, which, as its name indicates, is at once a workshop and a museum. The centerpiece of this museum is a pocket watch called the Universelle, which is one of the most complicated watches ever made. AP has just recreated this watch in their new Code 1159 RD4, which is a mechanical watch that has 40 functions and 23 complications. For the 30th anniversary of the Beast, they have just released the Royal Oak Offshore Chronograph, a faithful reproduction of the model first introduced in 1993 and designed by Emmanuel Guilly. The Offshore, in its turn, was a variation of the original 1972 design by Gérard Jantin. Here's a Royal Oak Jumbo made for the 20th anniversary of the model, entirely executed in platinum. And here's an 18-karat white gold version with the Tuscan dial, just introduced as part of the 2023 novelties.
All right. Thanks for your patience. Sorry for that loop, but had to be done. I need to take a break once every so often. Model 1 is nice, like Night Stalker LA. I don't even know what that means. But as you know, Thomas, yeah, they somehow managed to have even a lower depth rating than the original Royal Oak, which is 50 meters at any rate. So it is what it is, man. It's that's never the strong suit of Royal Oaks, the depth rating or the water resistance. It's certainly not the watch that you want to take to bathe, that you want to take to, I don't know, to the jacuzzi, to the hot tub, whatever you want to call it. That's not it. That's not what it's made for. And quite frankly, I mean, who wants to take six figures into that? I don't know who you were asking for, but in the Zodiac watch, Moscow is still in the city's ring. I think that's something that we can check quite easily. I don't know. Why would they remove Moscow from the World Time Cities ring? It's right there. Look, Cairo, Dubai, and Moscow. Yeah, wouldn't make sense. Wouldn't make sense. I mean, guys, Moscow is there to stay. Moscow is there to stay. Cold wars, hot wars, they can begin and end. The people, the people who live, who make up these countries, the cities they build, the civilization and culture expressed in them, that's not gonna go anywhere. So I would seriously question the judgment of a watch company that would go so far as removing a city from an expression of world time because of a contemporary political situation. That sounds so short-sighted, so close-minded, and so against my values that I can't even begin to express. So I'm glad Zodiac didn't do that. I hope no watch company does that. I've heard in the past that some distributors or watch boutiques, some dealers refuse to sell Konstantin Chaikin watches because he's based in Russia. That sounds outrageous to me. I know, for example, because I'm interested in the sport of boxing, which is an individual sport, one of the alphabet organizations, one of the so-called sanctioning bodies, namely WBC, World Boxing Council, has a complete embargo on Russian boxers. So if that's your only citizenship, you can't compete with them. You can't be ranked by them. You can't fight in qualifiers or eliminators by them. You can't, uh, you can't fight for their version of the championship. You can't fight for their belt unless you apply for some sort of special exemption. I mean, all of this is outrageous, people. I mean, it's such a silly thing to even contemplate. I wanted to go back to some of the watches that I was showing in this video. This is a shot of Le Brassus that particularly focuses on that museum workshop, the Musée Atelier Audemars Piguet. It's a very impressive structure. Again, if you ever end up in Switzerland and you find some time on your hand, you have a day to set aside, that would be a wonderful visit. Um, this was the original Universal Uhr, the Universal Pocket Watch. This is the particular recreation of it in the Code 1159 RD4, the Universal. And I was also quite fascinated by the fact that for the 30th anniversary of Royal Oak Offshore, again, the offshore design gets a lot of flack from the purists. And admittedly, it's not my favorite elaboration of the original Jarajanta design at all. But I still appreciate the fact that it added something to that design, to that expression, and made it popular and made it accessible, made it mainstream in a way that the original design was not. As delicate, as elegant, and as beautiful as it was in that particular period of time, it just was not what people are asking for. Um, so if I ask myself, would I have AP survive and continue to make watches still, or not? And if the Royal Oak Offshore, as much as the perpetual calendar watches that they sold in the 1980s, was part of helping Audemars Piguet survive through what was a generally tough time for the brand, I think that's just fine by me. In either case, I actually do think that it is a nice design, right? I'm trying to find the best word that I can muster. Um, since I think the original Royal Oak design was such a delicate balance between certain aspects of sleek, ultra thin dress watches that Audemars Piguet was known for until the 70s, and this brutal industrialist, modernist aesthetic of sports watch. When they decided to elaborate on the model, when they decided to offer a variation on the theme, they had to skew it one way or another, right? So it was either going to become more delicate and elegant and dressier, which had in a way already happened, right? head of head of design in Audemars Piguet was a woman named Jacqueline Dimier, and she was the person who not only came out with the woman's version of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, but also many other iterations of the Royal Oak, including the Perpetual Calendar, including the Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar. So that part of it was done in a way, and the only part left to elaborate in the Royal Oak legacy, if you want to do that, if rather than putting something out there that's completely original, was to push it towards the more brutal, towards the more sporty, towards the more towards the thicker end. So that's what Emmanuel Guilly did with the Beast, with the 25721 ST, which was originally in steel, and they have basically very faithfully reproduced this particular piece, all in black ceramic, including the full bracelet, which they finish just as they do any other material. So you get that aspect of the watch that has the interplay of variously finished surfaces. In this case, you also get the older petite tapisserie pattern, since this is paying homage to the original design by Emmanuel Guilly, the original release in 1993. Which you can see here. And again, I thought this was expressed also in the new Royal Oak Jumbo they have just released. Of course, that line, that product family, so to speak, is already a commitment to doing just that, right? We have an entire reference number that is dedicated to reviving in the most faithful way possible the icon of the brand, which is the Royal Oak Jumbo, which they call now extra thin, right? After all, 39 millimeters in today's catalog, even among other Royal Oaks, without even going into the offshore, is not such a large size. It's certainly not a jumbo. So you have to focus on its thinness. At any rate, the way they just released that in white gold with this Tuscan dial seems quite reminiscent to something they released a little more than 3 decades ago, which was basically the same model, 14806-2 in this case, made in platinum. Hey, Davi. Nice to see you, man. I don't know if the spelling changed on your name. I'm sure you are the same Davi that we know and love. Quick wristwatch check, as Archie used to say. I'm wearing my Universal Genève tri-compacts. I love this watch. You know, I used to
I used to kind of frown upon the moon phase as a complication, as something to have on the dial of a watch. But over the years, I really came around. Um, I really came around my stance and made a 180 on moon phase indicators, because I think,
mechanical watches in and of themselves are a throwback, are nostalgic objects, are really romantic expressions of our commitment to something beyond utility, or simply something other than utility and function. Because at this time, we have the time all around us. We have it on our oven. We have it on the microwave. We have it on our smartphone. We have it all over the place. And a lot of those devices, in fact, keep time more precisely and more accurately than any mechanical watch. Um, so ultimately, in this little corner of the world, in the world of watch collection and the wristwatch hobby, obviously we wear mechanical watches for timekeeping purposes, right? We do actually uh, read the time off them. I love a pure time only watch. Uh, I have some watches that have a date, and that proves useful in time. But in most cases, really, when I look at my watch, it's not necessarily to check uh, time. It's kind of, maybe it's a way of checking my relation to time. It's a way of making sense of what is going on during the day, what's going on with me. But it's really about taking a moment to perhaps slow down the passing of that time. And the mechanical watch, since it is this kind of curious object, since it is this kind of throwback object, kind of time capsule, if you will, is ultimately itself a very romantic and quaint object. Um, of course, there is also the simple fact, we were talking about it earlier, that people like the flex. All of us at some level who like watches so much, and who uh, pay so much money even for a single luxury watch, uh, are trying to show off at some level, even if you are otherwise very humble. So there is that aspect of wearing a wristwatch that is simply about accessorizing, that is simply about wearing a rather ostentatious piece of jewelry. But when you go beyond these two ideas of simple timekeeping and jewelry, or jewelry like accessory, you have to come to terms with the fact that it is something that is quite romantic, that it is something throwback, and it is something ultimately that sidesteps questions of utility. And that's where the moon phase indicator comes into play for me. That's how it comes into my consideration. I used to think it was completely useless. Now I love it because it's completely useless, right? I have nothing to do with it, honestly. As much as I respect the traditions of the lunar calendar, and as much as I follow it partly due to my religious faith, uh, I don't really need it. but it's so cool. It's so cute, especially because it is expressed in this particular watch in that sort of playful way, kind of like what they call a sturgeon moon. It is literally like an anthropomorphic expression. It's drawn as if it were a human face on the dial of the watch. Let me pull it up. But even when it isn't, right? That itself is I think a whole area of kind of romantic interest. All these different ways of expressing the moon. Will it be a realistic one? Will it be a romantic one? Will it be one that matches the precious material of the case? Will it be something that is anthropomorphic, that resembles the human face? So I look, hey Boston, how are you doing, man? Yeah, slight update. Nice to see you, man. What watches from the? Oh yeah, we just talked, Boston Collector. I wish you were here. I wish you were here. Hi, Tim G. Nice to see you. Tim G says AP killed it this year and love the Vacheron Constantin moon phase. Have the patrimony Vacheron Constantin. I like a lot of what Vacheron Constantin does. Those people who follow me on Patreon would know my love, because every third day I send them an entire selection of deals just from Vacheron Constantin dress watches, usually the 60s pieces with those ultra thin automatic movements, full rotor automatic movements, made by none other than JLC. I pump a lot of them. As some of you know, that's what I do on Patreon. If you support me on Patreon, which is still $10, I was supposed to update it on February 1st. I guess we just get a couple more days with the old rates. I sent 3 links to watch deals online, which, of course, with the bonuses and with random things that I send, add up to about 100 different ones. But a lot of it focuses on these sorts of pieces that fall under the radar and that don't necessarily get the spotlight on them in your usual outlets, and certainly are not hype watches at all. Yeah, this is an expression of the moon that I like as well. Some of them have a crater-like thing, but I also love it when it matches the material of the case simply. That's pretty cool, as always. Yeah, Vacheron Constantin is certainly a brand that I appreciate, both in its current collection and in terms of its archive. Let me see. I agree. AP probably had 8 watches that were really a complete package. Yeah, I was just talking about the RD2 that they just re-released in a limited edition of 200 pieces in titanium. So the ultra thin perpetual calendar is one that I like. I obviously love horologically the Universel collection, the 4 Code 1159s they have released that have 40 functions and 23 complications. But obviously, those are very, very niche pieces, and I'm sure that doesn't necessarily apply to what you're talking about, but I think they stand out, and I tried to express that both in this live stream and in the most recent short that I put out, which is literally 59 seconds. So you might want to check that out. Sent in the link there. The other pieces that I really I obviously like the 16202 BC, the new jumbo extra thin in white gold with the Tuscan dial. Um, those are extremely rare in the jumbo version, right? They're a little more numerous, although by no means easy to come by in the perpetual calendars of the Royal Oak. So for them to introduce something like that, something that's otherwise so rare and so niche into the lineup, and not necessarily as a limited edition, although it will be extremely exclusive still, that was very intriguing to me. I loved the 15550 BA, the reduced size 37 millimeter Royal Oak with the turquoise stone dial. Yeah, those are the ones that I really liked. I'm still not hot at Code 1159 as a design, whether it's now at the entry level of their lineup as stainless steel, or whether the design was a little updated and cosmetically enhanced, perhaps. All of those details to me don't really matter. Again, I appreciate the horological flexing that goes on at that rarefied level of $1.5 million watch with 23 complications, but that's just flexing, right? That's just a way for them to legitimately market themselves and that lineup by honoring their own watchmaking heritage, which was expressed in that 1899 pocket watch that is still held as the center, well, that is now held, I should say, as the centerpiece of their museum. The Tuscan dial, I don't know if it's hand hammered. I know Carolina Bucci, who first brought that technique into AP's lineup now a long time ago, does that herself with that pneumatically operated machine. It's handheld. I don't know, a friend of mine, part of the audience, St. Peter, said a couple of days ago, as someone who is a designer himself, even when it's a pneumatically operated or electrically operated machine that he uses, he has a hard time calling the final work handmade. I understand his concerns. I think that would not be my concern, but he also said, I think, once upon a time, he saw a video on AP's own YouTube channel that had a demonstration of that Florentine finish with that device held at the end of a CNC machine. Now, I don't know. I don't know if that's the way they do it. If you have seen some of the hand-hammered Tuscan dials, if you have seen the hand-finished Florentine style jewelry in the past, and if you can actually take a look at the Tuscan dial as it is resurrected in 16202, I think you can tell that yourself very easily. If you have, and quite frankly, I mean, I'm sorry to be so harsh, but if you can't tell that, you probably shouldn't be wheeling and dealing at that particular segment. But yes, so if you have seen one of these Tuscan dials before from the previous generations when they were hand hammered. And if you can get a chance to see this one, you should be able to tell, because it's pretty easy. You know, when it's stamped guilloche rather than hand operated rose engine, you can easily tell. When something is done by a CNC machine rather than hand guided, you can pretty easily tell. Yeah. Honestly, I don't know a lot about overseas line and what kind of dial finishes they have. Um, you know, again, not my favorite aspect of what Vacheron Constantin does these days. I do like a lot of the ultra thin perpetual calendars that Vacheron Constantin puts out in the overseas line. And I like the fact that still uses calibers that are built on the Jaeger-LeCoultre 920. So that same base, which was used for the original Royal Oak 5402, the original Patek Philippe Nautilus 3700, and the original Vacheron Constantin sports chic or luxury sports watch in 222. So that's something exciting about the overseas perpetual calendars for me, such as this one, for example. No, I actually don't want to register my interest, whatever that means. Yeah. So this piece, for example, or anything else that indicates ultra thin, for that matter, uses a caliber base that is still the JLC 920, which in Vacheron Constantin's terminology is caliber 1120. And again, I mean, this is, you know, I think most AP Royal Oak perpetual calendars are 9 millimeters in thickness, in the thickness of the case. They're either 41 millimeters in diameter or 39 millimeters in diameter. The RD2, whether it's in titanium or platinum, is 6.2 or 6.3. So that's quite significant. This one is 8.1, which is quite impressive, of course, for a perpetual calendar piece. Honestly, yeah, I'm kind of torn also, by the way, Boston, because the Tuscan dial in and of itself belongs to the heritage in a way. So I'm not as torn about it, but as much as I like a lot of the new dial expressions for the jumbo, in all these different metals. Let's see, for example, like the BA, which is 18 karat yellow gold with this fumé gold dial or champagne dial.
It kind of reminds me of these sunburnt gold submariners, like from the 4-digit era, when they're nicely baked over the decades. I've done a little shorts video for that as well. I think it's cool, and I like the fact that it retains the tapisserie in this case. So I love that one. I love the Tuscan, but again, I believe this picture is a rendering essentially. So I would love to see what they have done with the most recent version of it, and whether it's hand hammered or not. I would love to know that. I like this black charcoal gray aesthetic. So I love the tapisserie dial on this as well. But yeah, there were a couple of previously, there were a couple of, like you said, non-tapisserie kind of dial executions. Also in the 15202 reference, and I was never quite sure about those, because for me, again, that tapisserie dial is an element of the original design. So if you are doing the jumbo, what are you exactly doing, right? But if you want to be that much of a purist about it, then you shouldn't have different dial colors, etc. And that's not very, that's not a very productive lane to go down. Yeah, I kind of love the 222 Davi. I should have gotten one when they were so cheap. But yeah, the one in gold that they have just introduced in the Historique series, and I'm almost sure they are going to expand upon that. Let's just put it like that. I I have a feeling, let's say, that having removed some models from the Historique collection, they have opened up a significant place for the old new 222 that they are going to give us in different metals. But what I was saying earlier is 5-6 years ago, before everyone was turned on to these things, and to Vacheron Constantin specifically as a brand, these were in their original version, especially in two-tone, dirt cheap. In steel, a little more collectible, but still not that expensive at all. I should have gotten one then, but I've said this before. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but Vacheron Constantin, because of its symbol, is a brand I feel like that I will always love from far. I'm not sure if I want to carry that on my wrist, that symbol, that logo, but that's just me. It's not a big deal. I think it's an important part of their heritage. It is their symbol. If they want to put it in as many different places on the watch as possible, including the links of the overseas bracelet, by all means. I actually think it's a quite nifty little thing they do. For example, with the Corne de Vache, their iconic chronograph 1955 from the same series. So they have of course, as the
as the caliber of that watch 1142, which is presented as an in-house caliber, but is actually a movement that shares its architecture with the legendary Lemania CH27. Of course, in this case, it is uh, finished, uh, put together, assembled, and regulated to the standards, to a different standard, to a standard where it deserves the hallmark of Geneva, of course. I also think, again, speaking of the Maltese crosses, that it's kind of adorable that they have it even on the column wheel as well. I think that's a nice detail, but hey, um, I'm not I'm not too hot on that myself. There's just too much of it in their imagery, on their watches. In the 222, you have one on the dial and one in the corner of the integrated case. It's a little too much for me. OG baby girl, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thomas Broadband says earlier, wearing the Vacheron Constantin overseas ultra thin in white gold is amazing. I mean, yeah, man. I remember I tried on when the overseas came out in 2016. This must have been in 2017. I actually tried the ultra thin version of it they had for a rather short time period in white gold. Do you guys know this watch? Um, it's long discontinued now. That was also based on the JLC caliber 920 rather than the in-house. I think that's why it was discontinued almost instantly. Um, well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it didn't last too long. This is, I think, the reference was probably called, I want to say, ah, I want to say the reference was called maybe 2000V or something. And it was in white gold. It was based on 1120, which was itself, well, it was running on 1120, which was something that they base on the JLC caliber 920. Oh, there we go. There it is. No dates. Man, this was an incredible watch. Um, I'm sure they still have some of these on the secondary market, and those are the watches to get. Thank you so much, OG baby girl. I appreciate you. Um, but yeah, nowadays they have at least the same base with the perpetual calendar module. The great thing about white gold, of course, I know Thomas is my kind of person in this sense. It's very subtle, right? It's a white metal. It's precious metal, but since it's white, it doesn't really scream uh, the fact that you are wearing a gold watch, right? You are not really broadcasting that over rooftops, which is really nice. Um, but yeah, nowadays you at least have this, which of course is twice the price. Um, and by the way, the 2000V was not only thinner, but it was also a little smaller. So
it had a kind of profile and proportions that made it wear significantly smaller on your wrist, which could be another issue. If you love the Vacheron Constantin overseas, and somehow the standard iteration is a little too large for you, and we're talking about 4500 V in this case, that can be an option, on the secondary market. I know they are quite rare, and I know they have started going for a premium, but that's a watch that's probably never going to come back into the lineup. But yes, this would be a great thing to own. Of course, you're already stepping into six figures. I think it's just a smidgen over $100,000. It has a caliber built upon the 1120. That's such an amazing watch. Again, 8.1 in thickness. The diameter is a little more than 41. Really an amazing piece. The only alternative you have to this that's anything similar at all, which is to say, in this case, a true blood sports watch that has a perpetual calendar, and that even has the benefit of actually being in stainless steel, is the Jaeger-LeCoultre Polaris perpetual calendar, which has, pardon me, finally started making an appearance on the secondary market. And it comes with the full bracelet, as well as the rubber band with its extra déployant buckle as well. Has that double crown aesthetic that you can associate both with JLC's heritage line Memovox, their wrist alarms, as well as, of course, the Polaris divers, since the upper crown actually rotates the inner timing bezel in this case. I think this is an incredible bargain on the secondary market already, but I expect these prices to fall even further. And what you get here is not just one perpetual calendar movement of many. I mean, it's, since it builds on that heritage of Kurt Klaus, which, of course, was head of watchmaking at IWC at a certain point in time, and his module that was built on Valjoux 7750 opened an entire era that people like to call sometimes the democratization of complications. And imagine again, when the Da Vinci perpetual calendar that employed this module came out, right, in 1985. That was entering a space that belonged literally until then to Patek Philippe, because unless you were literally bespeaking a watch to either a known brand or some other kind of niche watchmaker, there was literally no perpetual calendar chronograph
at the time that was in serial production, except for Patex's 1518, which was only produced in less than 300 examples. And I think it was only produced from 1941 to maybe 1952 or something. 54. Yeah. So, the Da Vinci came in 85. It was only the second perpetual calendar chronograph to be produced, but the perpetual calendar module that Kurt Klaus put on it was so inventive in that it only needed a single crown to adjust the perpetual calendar in unison, in synchrony, and it would not need another adjustment until the next century. So this is exactly what you're getting in this JLC as well. There's only a single pusher for the chronograph, for the perpetual calendar to be adjusted. Of course, the module is set here not on a chronograph movement, so you are just getting a perpetual calendar, which is still a lot. You have also a 4-digit expression of the date, which is kind of signature of that Code Class module as well, and an AM PM indicator at the center of the watch right here, a moon phase at 6 o'clock for the northern hemisphere, and I think it's the southern hemisphere moon phase that is indicated by that pointer in that same subdial. So yeah, if you can't step into that territory of the 6 digits, this is what you have. Of course, I want to bring up another watch that's, in this case, basically a new flagship piece for Hopling 2, and that offers a very interesting entry into this segment as well. The Hoblings came out with this perpetual calendar chronograph in September, if I'm not mistaken. They had also a black and white version that was put out there in collaboration with Masena Lab. That was sold out quite fast. But their own model, which is very exclusive anyway, I think they make less than 200 watches, maybe even less a year. It has this beautiful silver dial, salmon dial, I'm sorry. Of course, it has a perpetual calendar with the moon phase at 12 o'clock, a leap year indicator at 6 o'clock, lodged into that subdial, which expresses the month, day of the week, date, and of course, the
there's a 30-minute counter, which is also where the moon phase indicator is housed as well. And you have the chronograph seconds, right? There are no small seconds in the watch. Everything is operated by a mono pusher, right? Start, stop, reset for the chronograph hand. And including the taxes, the list price on this is 23,500 euro. So it is something that's a little bit more humble, really wearable as well. I think the dimensions are 38 and a half, and the thickness is not too shabby either at 13 millimeters. I think the Polaris Perpetual calendar is almost 15, if I'm not mistaken. And again, list price for that is $33,000 now, even though you can already find it for significantly less than that on the secondary market. Okay, the Polaris is 42 millimeters in diameter and right under 12 millimeters in thickness, whereas the Chrono Felix Perpetual, which is a perpetual calendar monopusher chronograph, is 38 and a half millimeters in case diameter with that double-stepped bezel and monopusher, giving it a very classic and classy expression, in addition to the salmon dial, of course. And it is 13 millimeters in thickness, which is not too shabby. It's not a hockey puck by any means. Thank you, Boston. I'm sorry. I missed you. Probably you have already left, but thanks for being here. Yeah, the earlier I think this is a different one that they just released, because the one they did in collaboration with Masena Lab was literally black and white, and that's another brand, by the way, I really like, and that has been putting out a lot of interesting pieces recently. But yes, this is the Masena Lab collaboration with the sans serif Arabic numerals, the black and white expression that is even preserved in the moon phase as well. I have been told that this particular edition was inspired by a black and white photograph of 1518. Of course, that one, the Patek 1518, has the moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock rather than 12, but still makes sense. Let's see if we can find a photograph like that. Did I have a photograph like that? I wonder. Yeah, this is, let me see. I can pull up
this one because I've been making a video on this that I should just finish and release, instead of agonizing over it, because I like it so much. I spent too much time, and now, since I didn't release it when they had actually come out with the watch, I now feel like it's too delayed, but I should come up anyways. So this is their standard model with the Salmon dial. This is the Masena Lab collaboration that already sold out. This is the original IWC Da Vinci, which was after Patek's 1518, the first perpetual calendar chronograph to come out in serial production. This is the Doppel chronograph by IWC, which, in fact, much like his mentor Kurt Klaus, Richard Habring, produced as a module on the Valjoux 7750, and in fact, for the 10th anniversary of the Da Vinci, they actually came out with a split-second chronograph version of the perpetual calendar, and it had 10 hands. So that's how they celebrated the 10th anniversary in the most quirky and IWC way possible. That was a fantastic piece. And again, since brands like Habring and Erlanger und Söhne like doing what's more difficult first, Habring 2 first released actually a split-second chronograph perpetual calendar rather than just a perpetual calendar chronograph. This is a bigger watch, of course. I think it's 42 millimeters. The Opel Felix, which shares with it the, of course, the same movement base, is 42 millimeters. I think this is also 42 millimeters. And that was, of course, the split-second chronograph itself, since it was Habring's own module on Valjoux 7750. Once the pattern expired, he carried it over immediately to his brand that he had already running at the time. So this was a great piece they produced. This is that 1518, which inspired the Masena Lab version, presumably in a black and white kind of setting. Oh, this is me making it black and white if I succeeded. And you can kind of see. That was the inspiration. Not a copy by any means, but, and this, of course, is a much more modern version of Patek Philippe perpetual
calendar, chronograph. Namely the 5970 in platinum with the Salmon dial. Oh, wait a second. I think it's in white gold. Sorry. It's in white gold and Salmon dial. And this is the movement inside that chronoperpetual Felix, or chronofelix perpetual, rather. I'll be right back. Yeah, I'm back. Two interesting pieces of news, I think, that in many ways reflect the kind of
picture that we have been painting on this channel, that I have been painting with my collaborator, El Profesor, who joins us from the UK whenever possible. I have said in the past that in the aftermath of the recession, in the aftermath of this market crash, brands will intensify their efforts to gain control of the secondary market. Of course, that is even more the case nowadays because, pardon me, according to many studies, by the next decade, in less than in less than 10 years, the secondary market of watches will actually overtake the primary market, right? With especially with the new generation of watch buyers and collectors almost instinctively going to the second market now, as a result of both looking for deals but also feeling increasingly alienated in an environment where you can't actually get watches through the official channels, through the habitual channels such as authorized dealers and boutiques. So by 2033, I think, it was being predicted that let me see what the exact number was, because this is from Deloitte's study of the Swiss watch industry for 2022, and yeah, it says actually by 2030 they estimate the pre-owned market to grow to 35 billion Swiss francs, and it will end up making more than half of the market. So, by the next decade already, the secondary market will be bigger than the primary market. So it only makes sense, especially in this day and age where a lot of the brands are just trying to mind the bottom line, trying to find more ways of increasing their revenue, trying to find more ways to gain an even more extended and exclusive control over, possibly exclusive control over how their watches are being unsold. They keep introducing these certified pre-owned programs. Some of them are very innovative about it. Some of them are very careful about it, and in a way respectful of their heritage, as Gégé Lecoutre, which did a very special program with the collectibles, which I explored in an earlier video, which I will share in the chat right now. By the way, guys, I've been live for more than 2 hours now. So if you have learned anything from this stream, if you have appreciated and enjoyed any aspect of it, please hit the like button. It really, really does help. That would be amazing. And this is the video that I did on JLC collectibles. But yeah, it turns out that Audemars Piguet will launch its own certified pre-owned program by the end of the year. Um, this is Rob Report, another top player in the watch industry, staking its own claim on the secondary market. Of course, Paige uh, Redinger here means other than Rolex. I don't think this article paid much attention to Gégé Lecoutre as much as I could tell. Audemars Piguet is the latest watch industry heavyweight to start a proprietary secondary market program. The company will launch a certified pre-owned program by the end of this year. The news comes on the heels of Rolex's surprising announcement of its certified pre-owned initiative in December 2022. I really don't understand why anyone would classify that as surprising, because at the end of the day, it is really, again, very predictable when you look at the economic downturn and how it affected the market of watches. And more importantly, ultimately, it is Rolex's way of literally certifying what most of its authorized dealers do. Um, Ultimately, it is a way for them to get a slice of the secondary market at least, but ideally get a tighter control on how their watches are bought and sold, period, because it is their product. And again, it is basically a way of finding a fail-safe method to create added value for some of these pre-owned watches for their preferred network of authorized dealers, because a lot of these dealers are quickly understanding that they have an easier time just working, or at least before uh, March, they had really completely a lot of them were going fast and loose doing backdoor deals anyways, but some of them were simply exasperated by the fact that they saw that they could make so much more selling the same kinds of watches on the secondary market. So Rolex is finding a way of appeasing some of their local authorized dealers with this program. So nothing surprising about it. They're finding ways of asserting more control on their product. They're finding ways to increase their revenue, and they're finding ways to reward their loyal network of authorized dealers in some way. Let's continue. According to news broken over the weekend by Miss Tweed, a European publication by Astrid Wendland covering the luxury industry, Audemars Piguet CEO François-Henri Benamias announced the initiative at a luxury recruitment conference in Paris last week. Indeed, Rob Report spotted Yoni Ben Yehuda, head of watches at Material Good, an authorized dealer of pre-owned Audemars Piguet watches at Hôtel des Horlogères in Le Locle in Switzerland last week, where he was staying while visiting the adjacent AP manufacturer. I mean, in a way, Material Good is kind of an authorized dealer of pre-owned Audemars Piguet anyway, so I'm sure they have something up their sleeve either to expand their operation or work out a deal that would include a few more of those sorts of establishments as part of the network. And Audemars Piguet is apparently expecting the program to be a huge business, unsurprisingly, given the astronomical prices of its Royal Oak watches in the secondary markets. The certified pre-owned business is going to be bigger than the new business, said Benamias at the conference, according to Miss Tweed. It will be good news for those with deep pockets who may have missed their opportunity to get a Royal Oak at retail. To me, all of this seems like
it will be just an opportunity for them to sell the watches at an even bigger premium. It's really insane. I mean, there has to be an end to all this greed at some point, but who am I to say, right? This is a channel, after all, that uh, dedicates quite a significant amount of time to explore luxury watches. Bruce G, thank you so much. These APs are likely out of my price range. Just to acknowledge your time and effort to share your passion. I appreciate you, Bruce G. You are great. You have been here for me all this time, and you're always so supportive with your comments, with your questions, and with your super chats. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you uh, beyond what I do best, which is to talk about watches. But if there is something you want me to explore in this episode, please feel free. These timepieces, i.e., the Royal Oaks, have become notoriously difficult to purchase due to supply and demand issues. Well, I mean, I think there are other questions, but let's continue. Benamias cited production constraints and insisted it was not a strategy for scarcity. Right. The program will offer, this is AP's certified pre-owned program, will offer an authenticity guarantee so that the buyers can feel safer with their purchase than they might buying from a gray market dealer. The test phase for the project is set to be coming at the end of 2023. I mean, all of this is a little strange to me again because they are mentioning material good themselves. So the test phase should be already complete. They have been doing this for a while now. But anyway, let's continue. It's not the watchmaker's first foray into CPO dealing. It launched a program before the pandemic, but put it on hold after it received some criticism for selling the same watch twice. How did they how did they actually overcome that problem again? Please tell me. But AP has also been working with Material Good for quite some time. In addition to independently selling authorized pre-owned watches, Material Good also operates boutiques for the company in East Hampton, Dallas, and Boston, and is also involved in its AP house in New York City's meatpacking district. And it would appear that Material Good may be heavily involved in the new CPO program. So in a way, you have Rolex and Bucherer in one end, and then AP and Material Good on the other. Business, of course, is already booming for Audemars Piguet. Revenue reached more than 2 billion euro, roughly 2.17 billion in US dollars in 2022. The debut of the new CPO program will coincide with Benamias' departure. The executive is set to leave the company by the end of the year. I am kind of wondering more about who will replace him than where he will go, which is the question that people are asking. I don't know why. By then, Benamias will have been at the company for a decade, where he oversaw renewed interest in the brand fueled by serious marketing. I think he has been at AP for much longer. I think he became CEO in 2012. So, and I think by that time it was interim, perhaps. I don't remember the name of the CEO immediately before him. Was it your cohort? Oh, yeah. But in either case, I think he has been
with the brand since early 90s, probably like 1994 or something. So it's more or less 3 decades with the company, but 10 as the CEO. Anyways, where he oversaw renewed interest in the brand, fueled by serious marketing, notably with high-profile celebrities including Kevin Hart, Serena Williams, LeBron James, and Mark Ronson. He was also instrumental in tightening the reins on distribution, pulling back from wholesale accounts in favor of selling directly through AP-operated boutiques. This is my huge pet peeve. I mean, I don't know to what extent they're operated by AP or not. I don't know if that's simply an alibi, but there's so many horror stories by now of people being mistreated by AP boutiques from all over the world. It's hard to simply classify them as anecdote at this point. So there's a lot in those two sentences, right? Of a brand at a certain level that is just trying to serve a very exclusive and exclusivist group of clientele rather than any new clients, unless they're already part of the club in some way. The CPO program will offer yet another layer of control over the brand, image, and sales. And the last question is this: Audemars Piguet, Rolex, and Patek Philippe are set to make up more than half of the total market for pre-owned watches. I think that's a questionable statement. Where and according to what kind of criterion? I don't know, but let's take that as read, which begs the question, will Patek be next? Absolutely. I think they will be, and there will be more. And, Gégé Lecoutre already has a program. Vacheron Constantin, again, has a program called Les Collectionneurs. And in either case, you have much more thoughtful, much more limited, much more curated programs that are more interested in having that sort of control, custodianship, and nurturing over the brand image and brand heritage than necessarily sales. I think in the case of brands like Rolex, AP, and Patek Philippe, these sorts of programs are in the first instance or more strongly oriented towards making a profit, towards actually making money on selling more watches and selling the same watch 2-3 times or more. Good morning, Fries. Hey. OC says the person who leaked this info also leaked that FHB was leaving AP back in January 2022. Well, good for her. Good for her. She's a journalist. That's her job. Her job is to leak this sort of information. I think none of it was such a huge secret in the first place, and they ended up announcing it quite soon. Anyways, maybe it was in the offing even before, quite honestly. The other piece that I wanted to highlight from Rob Report is about the layoffs at Chrono 24, and I want to actually, if you guys give me a second, I remember I have talked about this back in December, but at that time, oh, The professor is here. Professor, I'm going to share the link for you. Please, if you're still here, I know it's been a while, but please do join. I am waiting for you. And this is something that we can, of course, talk about together. I don't know if that was you from earlier, but anyway, let me see. Um, let's see. I want to scroll back a little more. Let's see. Yeah, I think that wasn't actually the same. Yeah, so I'm gonna read the earlier one first. This was uh, published by Watch Pro on December 12th, 2022, with the title "Major Pre-Owned Watch Trader Lays Off Almost Half Its Staff Before Christmas." Again, this is something that the professor and I predicted here, that things are going to get quite tough as recession sets in by the end of the year and as unemployment numbers rise. And this is certainly what's happening, at least in Europe. Chrono24 is a platform, a marketplace. It does not buy watches. It does not sell watches. It does not refurbish watches. It does not even check or authenticate the watches for sale on its site. It does not buy watches. It does not sell watches is not exactly true. And I think that's the program they're discontinuing anyways. If you have spent enough time on Chrono24, you'll recognize that once every so often, although very rarely and increasingly rarely, you will see a watch that's actually sold by Chrono24. They do have some watches listed in that way. They do have some partners for that as well. And I think that's what didn't really stick. So they have laid off in the first place a number of people because of that. This remains the case today, but with two exceptions. So here are the exceptions. Chrono24 bought German pre-owned watch trader Zeitauktion in 2019 and British business Sotheby's. Is that how you pronounce it? Sotheby's, I guess, right? Xupes in the UK earlier this year. So these are the two partners, Zeitauktion and Sotheby's. Both were opportunistic acquisitions and bought Chrono24 expertise and experience on how to buy, service, and refurbish pre-owned watches it promotes. Zeitauktion claims to be the largest supplier of luxury pre-owned watches in the European Union, with over 6,000 certified timepieces in stock. The challenge with buying and holding pre-owned watch stock is that it changes in value day by day, and the economic laws of supply and demand impact prices. Yeah, not a problem in 2019 to 2021 with prices soaring, but they have been in free fall since, and the market is flooded with sellers trying to shift stock at a time when there are very few buyers willing to buy until prices find a floor. And this is something that the professor insisted on, as you know, for a very long time, simply explaining it as a new era of austerity and as the economics, as an expression of the economics of thrift, right? If you saw something listed at 5 units a few months ago on the secondary market or on the primary market, and you come today when the markets are crashing and you see it for 3, obviously you are going to think, let me hold on to my money because this clearly is in free fall and I might find a better opportunity. I might find a better deal down the road. And let me assure you, that is in fact the case. There will be more watches and there will be more deals and better deals as time goes on. My guess, again, this not being financial advice until the end of the year, but there are some very educated opinions that differ from that. Since Chrono 24 bought Zeitaktion 3 years ago, the team has grown from 35 employees to over 100, but that hiring spree has come to an abrupt end this year, and the company is now laying off around 40% of its workforce. So the earlier December piece was about Zeitaktion laying off about 42 employees. It had been feared that Zeitaktion could be completely closed, but a spokesperson for Chrono 24 said the 42 redundancies had been made after growth failed to materialize since the acquisition. So that was December. Now in January, this is what is happening with Chrono 24. Further layoffs, in fact. Now the talk is of 13% of its employees being laid off, which amounts to 65 jobs. The company axed 65 jobs and offered severance packages to some of its workers at its headquarters. It was only a matter of time before the yo-yoing of the secondary watch market brought about casualties. Chrono 24, the leading online marketplace for luxury timepieces since 2003, has slashed about 13% of its workforce following a nosedive in the price of pre-owned wrist candy by Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe. The company eliminated 65 jobs and offered severance packages to some workers at its headquarters in Karlsruhe, Germany, as reported by Bloomberg. Zeitaktion was in Chemnitz, apparently. So this is in fact further layoffs in Chrono 24. Again, please do realize these things are happening simultaneously, right? The leading online platform is not exactly crumbling, but literally shrinking, whereas some of these giants of the industry are taking that opportunity to enter into the market to gain further control over how their watches are being bought and sold on the secondary market. So just like Chrono 24 made those opportunistic acquisitions of Zeitaktion and Suppies a few years ago, now the tides have turned, and Rolex and Patek and Audemars Piguet may be making that sort of overture into the market for that specific reason, right? And Rolex and AP already have announced their certified pre-owned programs. The company hired about 100 workers last year amid booming sales, but is now struggling with extreme fluctuation in the value of pre-owned pieces. Over the past few years, secondhand watches have shifted dramatically when it comes to the big three. Um, that's an interesting expression, but again, we'll take it as read. As the demand for new models outstripped supply during the pandemic, many shoppers turned to the secondary market to snap up top tier pieces at a premium. Savvy collectors saw there was a buck to be made and began offloading sought after models. The market was flooded by with pieces by Rolex, Patek, and AP through 2021 and into the spring 2022. As a result, prices plummeted. Again, we have actually foreseen this, and I don't think that's stopping anytime soon. Certainly not before. So, in my opinion, at least for a while yet. Let's put it like that. The nosedive has also been attributed to rising inflation, the weakening economies in the US and Europe, and the collapse of cryptocurrency. We have seen very volatile, you could call it a roller coaster situation in the industry. Chrono's co-CEO Tim Stracke said, indeed, the price of a platinum Rolex Cosmograph Daytona has dropped 28% to about $103,000, which is 83,000 pounds sterling in a year, according to Subdial 50 Index. That notorious one again, the 50, which is an index of 50 most hyped up pieces, right? So it's not, when you look at that index, it's not really entirely representative of the market, but it is what it is. The Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 with a blue dial has fallen 35% to roughly 103,000 as well. Interesting. While the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak with a blue dial decreased by 29% to about 70,000, according to the data. It's worth noting that the going rate for such watches on the secondary market is still well above retail. Indeed, I mean, for example, the 16202, which is the current Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo Extra Thin reference, is around $33,000 in retail pricing, plus tax, of course. We're adjusting to the current economic realities, the CEO Stracke added. Interestingly, pre-owned watches continue to grow in popularity. The secondary market is expected to surge to 85 billion, which is to say 85 billion US dollars, which is to say 79 billion euro by 2033. According to a recent industry report by Swiss firm Lux Consult. Stracke also said the value of transactions conducted on Chrono 24 increased by about 28% in 2022 before growth slowed in the second half of the year. The marketplace has about 500,000 watches for sale at any given time from 3,000 dealers and 30,000 private sellers. What's more, as we have mentioned, Rolex and AP are launching their own certified pre-owned programs to cater to vintage buyers. Of course, not vintage. Vintage doesn't equal secondary markets. And again, I think there's a difference between how Rolex and AP are curating, or how they seem to curate their certified pre-owned programs that are still heavily slanted towards more recent examples of watches, at best something that you can classify as neo-vintage, perhaps, where with Gégé Lecoutre or Vacheron Constantin, you have certified pre-owned programs that
are much more focused on curating vintage pieces, properly restoring and overhauling them in their manufacture, and then offering them to the public, to their collectors, with that added value of warranty, as well as guarantee of authenticity, as well as a certificate of authenticity as well. So that seems to me to be a little bit of a difference between what Rolex and AP are doing, which is pretty much about getting a nice slice of the secondary market as soon as possible, preferably instantly, but more importantly, gaining over midterm significant control over the secondary market, gaining some measure of control over how their pieces are being bought and sold on the secondary market, whereas there are brands who conduct themselves otherwise, who are more interested in really taking care of their heritage and also brand image, and building in some way their brand equity, yes, but I think they are much less interested in making immediate profits from selling more watches, right? When it comes to Vacheron Constantin's Les Collectionneurs program, or Gégé Lecoutre's new collectibles program, ultimately they are trying to find ways to highlight the long-standing tradition of watchmaking as expressed by the models in their archive, rather than trying to sell more watches, try to sell the same watches time and again and again. So I do appreciate this particular approach so much better than the certified pre-owned programs that Rolex and AP apparently now have. And you can see that they have also done this rather cool thing of introducing this series, the collectibles, with a new reference guide, with a kind of companion volume, where they have more information about the 17 iconic models that they have introduced in this collection. And I think it's a really wonderful way of highlighting Gégé Lecoutre's place in horological history, by focusing on these heritage pieces that go well beyond than just the reverso, which is obviously widely recognized
as representative of the brand, and rightly so. But I think this is a wonderful program that basically turns attention to the heritage of the brand that is expressed in all these different designs and complications that were at once of their time, but also in certain cases also um, before their time, in the way that you have, for example, um, this little piece right here, right? The shark with a number of different bezel inserts, right? One of which includes one with world time, right? We were just talking about Zodiac's new GMT watch that had a similar rotational bezel. There you go. Jaeger-LeCoultre had done it already. And there's, of course, one with a fully graduated 60 minutes. And there's one that has a telemeter. And, of course, the tachometer for the chronograph is already expressed on the periphery of the dial as well. Like the triple calendar, for example, which was perhaps most famously worn by Pablo Picasso, but which they also produced for Cartier as well. I'm trying to see if they had a Futurematic. I think they did. But at any rate, they have it here, for example, with the portholes that's express, for example, a power reserve, right? That's it's becoming a trend now to have self-winding, watches with self-winding movements with power reserve indicators on the dial, which was not really done before, either from the perspective of utility or from the perspective of visual aesthetics. And that's something they had done again, perhaps before everyone else, but certainly in this particular way of actually see. Please hit the like button. Please clap in the immortal words of Jeb Bush, like this one. Right. This was the power reserve watch that I meant. Just a small arc right under 12 o'clock. with a bumper automatic caliber rather than a full rotor. Bumper meaning this piece moving back and forth in here rather than being a full rotor. It's just such a cool piece. Very bare bones, very simple, but also just a beautiful aesthetic, and also 36 millimeters, perfectly wearable for today. Very elegant. The piece here is not exactly pristine, but at that price point, with the way that a lot of these pieces have been going for these days, it's not too bad either. But anyways, these are the kinds of deals that I sent to my most loyal supporters on Patreon. I'm gonna send the link again. I think it should be also pinned. It is included in the video description. It is also crawling in that ticker down below. Basically, if you sign up at $10 a month on Patreon, you get 3 links at least on a daily basis to watch deals online, and it is not only a value proposition in the sense that those watches are deals that I come across that I want to share with you that are already relatively well priced. But more importantly, since I curate them thematically in terms of certain genres and models of watches, in terms of brands and designs that have fallen under the radar, it also ends up being a rather educational experience as well. So this is very helpful, and I am actually going to increase that price on February 6th. But if you join before then, and this is the case with my loyal subscribers who have stayed with me, who have stood by me for so long, you'll be grandfathered for the rest of the year at that $10 a month rate. So join now before things change. I'm gonna provide increasingly more value and more exclusive content for my subscribers on Patreon. So I think that will be a great deal for 2023 if you join now. There are other ways to support the channel, of course, with PayPal and Cash App that I advertise down there. PayPal is connected to my email, which is my primary mode of communication, lordhellespontv@gmail.com. That is lordhellespontv@gmail.com. And I also have Cash App, which is $LHVVV, $LHVVV. And of course, you can always use the super chat to direct your questions and requests to me. Okay. Let's see. A few more tricks up my sleeve, but I want to make sure that I have something else to come back to tomorrow as well. So let's see if there's a topic that I can choose that we can talk about for the next next 40 minutes or so, because we don't have much time left before midnight. And as you guys know, I usually close at midnight. Um, I want to also share, as I always do, these 5 pieces from In Eichen. As you know, In Eichen is a very established auction house that specializes in selling wristwatches um, since the 70s. But they have been quite energized, youthful, and disruptive more recently. They curate very focused auctions, and I think there is more to come for the rest of the year. For example, the De Bethune private collection that's going to open on February 6th with 20 lots, which we might take a look at in a second. But they also have constantly a selection of timed pieces, which also have a set price, fixed price, that you can use to buy the piece now. So pretty much like eBay, more or less. And these are all pieces that they have listed now with only one day to go, because they're opening that next auction. Right? For example, they have this they have this 1815 homage to F.A. Lange moon phase. Right, in their proprietary honey gold case, one of 265. Beautiful guilloche dial, as you can see from the depth, certainly hand applied. Hand guided, I should say. And this is a piece with a fixed price of right under $55,000. And it is currently at 27,350, which seems almost like a steal with a day to go. Oh no, sorry. The current bid is 51,450, and the next bid would be 52,500. The thing you should keep in mind is that there's no buyer's premium at In Eichen. That's what I meant by saying it's disruptive, right? So that's an advantage for the buyer. That's something that you can take advantage of. In the case of this Alanganzone moon phase, even the fixed price is decent enough. But let's see how it will finalize. For now, there's a buyer from Italy who is ahead of the pack with $51,450 with 23 bids so far and 1 day to go. You have a Lange 1 time zone from the earlier generation. The bidding stands there at 31,750. It's a yellow gold piece. The time zone is, in terms of its sizing and proportions, more like the Grand Lange 1 rather than the
the traditional sizing. It's 42 millimeters. But still very wearable and quite a beautiful piece. That is currently being bid at 31,750. Again, 1 day to go. There is Parmigiani Fleurier toric chronograph, which is very similar to the one worn by King Charles III. I think his is in yellow gold and has a different dial, but this one is close enough. The fixed price is 21,900, and the bidding right now stands at 17,000 US dollars with a day to go. I think this is, in all its variations, this is one of the nicest pieces that have been made by Parmigiani Fleurier. They don't necessarily make watches in this tradition anymore. They have been trying to raise the profile of the brand and popularize it in a way. So they have phased out a lot of models, of which the toric chronographs were one. You can find these, again, in white gold, in yellow gold, in pink gold, with different dials, some of which look a little more sporty with different handsets. But overall, I think it's a great execution of a very luxurious chronograph in precious metal that runs on the base of the famous Zenith El Primero caliber 400s, 400Z specifically in this case. So it's a beautiful piece, very elegant, with lots of heritage, again, with Michel Parmigiani having the kind of reputation with the Zenith El Primero movement, of course, being one of the first, if not the first, self-winding chronograph, and having the kind of expressive elegance that Michel Parmigiani is very well known for. After all, he was, in conjunction with Daniel Roth, one of the two people who really created the signature of Breguet in wristwatches under the patronage of the Chomet brothers when the brand was making its revival. So that's a great chronograph, Parmigiani Fleurier toric chronograph in pink gold, that is currently being bid at $17,000 at In Eichen, with about a day to go. And again, In Eichen does not have a buyer's premium, which might make this more interesting. And finally, you have an FP Jaune Octa with a brass movement that is going absolutely bonkers. The fixed price can tell you the entire story in either case. This is, of course, as its name indicates, one of the FP Jaune watches with
The automatic movements, of course, it is from 2001. So the movement is brass. The rotor, which is exquisitely decorated with guilloche, is out of 22 carats pink gold. As you know, since brass movements have been discontinued and are never making a comeback, the earlier versions of FP Joan watches, I think the cutoff is around 2006, are very desirable, are very rare. And this particular piece, which otherwise seems pretty simple enough, has also this matted yellow gold dial, which gives it a very rustic and attractive look as well. The bidding currently stands at 142,200 with a day to go, and the increments are 5,500 US dollars. So I would expect this to hit the fixed price soon enough. This is the 38 millimeter case, if you were wondering. They also come in 40 millimeters nowadays. Of course, the watch is in platinum and is presented on an alligator strap and a matching platinum buckle. And they basically have already a few pieces that are coming up and that are going to start the minute these 7 lots end. Tomorrow there's a yellow gold Calatrava by Patek Philippe, Gégé Lecoultre Futurematic, a Piaget Altiplano in 18 karat white gold, an IWC Square Automatic, an IWC Golf Club Automatic, which is a very interesting watch. Possibly rather small for modern taste, but I think these are still quite nice on the wrist. This is 34 millimeters, so it's more like the reduced sized Ingenieur rather than the jumbo. Just think of it like that. If you have tried on both of those, you should know that the 34 millimeter is the reduced size, and it is significantly smaller than the so-called jumbo in IWC's Ingenieur line, which of course was likewise designed by Gérard Genta, as is the Royal Oak, as is the Patek Philippe Nautilus, as is the Cartier Pasha, as it is currently enshrined, so on and so forth. But this is, again, kind of a forgotten integrated bracelet watch from that same time period, and certainly deserving of another look, if nothing else. And the reduced sized versions, whether we are talking about the Ingenieur or the Golf Club here, are the ones that are still offering a value proposition. Such a bad name too for a watch.
I mean, what were golf club? It's um, it's an interesting thing. There's a reduced sized Royal Oak. Speaking of reduced sized versions of original Gérard Janta designs, this was the 36 millimeter version of what was then the jumbo. Um, so 14790 in steel with a so-called tropical dial that has aged into this copper like color palette. There are plenty of these in, from mid 90s especially. um I don't think this is a very attractive price. You can certainly find them for much cheaper on the secondary market. And this is exactly the kind of watch, by the way, that's going to continue to trend down, because they have their prices have skyrocketed, and in such a dramatic way in the last few years. These are the kinds of models that are seriously experiencing steep um, dips in value. So I would not advise that you get one at this price at all. But it seems an otherwise clean example. I guess this is one of those cases where they are selling an imperfect dial for a premium, which to me is always questionable, but it is what it is. It's done every day, unfortunately. And then there is also limited edition Frank Müller with an integrated, well, on a bracelet, I should say, small seconds on the subdial, and grand date at 12 o'clock. And a beautiful guilloche dial too. Again, the tonneau shape is an acquired taste, I understand. It was all the rage in the roaring 20s. It was all the rage in the 90s, thanks to Frank Müller. I don't know if they will make a comeback. I don't know if Frank Müller is making a comeback, but in either case, this is a piece, if you like the tonneau shape, would be an amazing piece to own. Very beautiful watch. White gold with a matching white gold bracelet. Looks absolutely stunning. Let's take a peek into this De Bethune auction that's coming up. It's based out of Zurich, but it's going to be basically an online auction that's going to take about 2 weeks. The bidding is going to open in a little more than a day and then concludes on February 20th. It's a lot of very interesting pieces, really through the ages, so to speak, De Bethune through the ages. Wow. So many lovely pieces, like lots
20, for example. De Bethune's jump jump hour watch, digital DB28DN. I think jump hour watches are really one of the purest and best expressions of the creativity and aesthetic touch of a brand. And this is more so the case, of course, when it comes to the independents. So this would be an absolute pleasure to own. Of course, the spherical moon phase right in the middle. The polished titanium case that De Bethune is so widely known for, of course. The dial is largely decorated uh, by this barleycorn guilloche. And of course, you have that iconic look on the back as well. You have a DB28 Skybridge. The crown at 12 o'clock. You know, what was merely an accent on a silvered guilloche dial on the DB28 digital, the jump hour piece. Here, the entire center dial is mirror polished and blue titanium, which again, of course, has become part of the visual signature of the brand, right? It's that heat blue titanium is something that they are very well known for, and something that they actually make themselves in their manufacture. And this piece has a starting bid of 76,600 at lot 19 in the upcoming In Eichen private collection auction. The DB28 jump hour was starting at 71,100. All prices I'm reading out are the US dollar conversions. You have the DB25L Starry Sky, white gold. So you still have the blue titanium dial, but this time you have a white gold case. The mirror polished bridges on the back create a very sleek and interesting aesthetic for the movement. And lot 18 is going to start bidding at 54,700. Then you have the DB25 Stradivarius titanium at lot 16, again with a polished titanium case with the classic pierced lugs, those Piguet hands here in gold, Roman numerals. On the outer ring, which is silvered, and then that starry sky, which is a mirror polished blue titanium, of course. And you see some of these pieces are brand new, basically, and unworn. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much they go for. And this DB25 Stradivarius in titanium at lot 16 is going to start bidding at $60,000, $60,200. Okay. Upvote the stream if you could. It really does help. That little bit of exposure gives me a lot. So please do. Lot 15. This is the Betune DB25 Midnight Blue and White Night. Much more classically inclined piece than most de Betunes you see, perhaps. Still very elegant, still very much representative of the brand's design aesthetic. With those pierced lugs. This is the De Betune Midnight Blue and White Night with the heat blued mirror polished titanium center dial, which has a white, what looks like a white enamel ring, in fact, with applied Arabic numerals and pink gold Piguet hands that match the case. These are, by the way, I mean, the Betune watches are quite oversized, and those immediately identifiable pier slugs don't necessarily help either. So these are watches that are large, wear big, and announce themselves, and that's something one should know if you have never tried them on. This is a 44 millimeter piece at lot 15 with bidding starting at 43,750. All right, I will go through a few more and then I'll call it a night. Let's see. We have the two perpetual calendars, so I will look at both of them. This is DB17. spherical moon phase, that guilloche decoration that looks as if it were emanating from that moon. It's a white dial, an absolutely stunning watch. You see how the Breguet hands glow with the same shade of blue as that titanium piece that makes the night sky in that moon phase indicator. It's absolutely amazing. This is 43 millimeters, so still a very significant piece, still a very big piece. But in a way, its design is much more classical and much more conventional when it comes to De Bethun's catalog. Again, there are so many wonderful details in this watch that you would come to appreciate even by taking a closer look. The curvature of the hands, the spherical moon phase, the dancing of the balance wheel and the mainspring, the glow of that night sky of the moon phase indicator, and the Breguet hands, and of course the Roman numerals and all the accents on the dial that match that subtle blue color scheme in terms of the accents. Beautiful pink gold piece. This is the De Bethune Perpetual Calendar DB17 from roughly around 2005, which is going to start bidding in about a day at 67,600. I have 10 more minutes to go, so if you have any questions, any requests, any demands, you can send them in with a super chat. I think I have maybe time for 2 more pieces, unless you stop me and then I'm gone. DB15, again, similar proportions. Similar kind of design aesthetic. Again, more, more conventional compared to the kind of design aesthetic that you perhaps learn to recognize De Bethune later on. This is a polished white gold case, very similar to what we have seen in DB17. In this case, you have a brighter white dial with lighter blue accents that are reflected in all the aspects of the dial. And of course, the accents in the moon phase especially the moon itself, matches the case material, which is something we were talking about earlier. Right, the different traditions of expressing the moon phase. DB15 perpetual calendar is going to start bidding in a day at 71,100 in US dollars. That was lot 11. DB17 was lot 12. Okay, maybe one last piece. Let's go. Lot 08. This was DB28 Aiguille limited edition. As you might know, of course, it's been quite a while now, but the De Bethune had won in 2011. De Bethune had won in 2011 the Aiguille d'Or, which is the grand prize in the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève, the industry awards in Geneva. So De Bethune introduced the DB28 Aiguille d'Or series to celebrate this victory in a limited edition of 50 pieces with some interesting details. And this was a piece that was 42.6 millimeters in diameter with 9.2 case thickness. And of course, it is a piece that has their now iconic floating lugs as well. It's a sandblasted zirconium case. Power reserve on the back. An open work ruthenium plated dial, silver minute ring, white gold hour indices, spherical moon phase at 6 o'clock, as you can see. I think this the central part of the case is I think still polished titanium, whereas that's exoskeleton, which includes the floating lugs, is the zirconium, I think. No, or I'm confused now about the material of this case. I don't want to misinform you, so let me double check. Hmm. Okay. Yes. All right. We have established it. So this piece, which is the Aiguille d'Or limited edition, 50 pieces, has the zirconium floating lugs, and the center case is actually mirror polished titanium. Hand wound movements with two main spring barrels, 6-day power reserve, which, as we mentioned, is expressed by an indicator on the back. A very cool and historically significant piece, one of 50, celebrating that grand prize victory from 2011. This is lot 08, DB28 Aiguille d'Or, which was itself released in the following year, 2012, so more than a decade old now. Lot 8 is going to start bidding at 65,650 US dollars. All right, as you can already tell, I'm a little tired and fading out slowly. I apologize about that. I'll be more fresh tomorrow. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for your presence and support. Please hit the like button. If you are just chancing upon this stream, subscribe. I'm here with watch content every day. I create other sorts of content, but I have live streams that run up to 4 hours and sometimes even longer. So thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. If you want to contribute to the channel, you can find the information in the crawling ticker. It's included in the video description as well, and also pinned in the chat. In either case, I'll see you tomorrow around the same time. I'm going to try to do something earlier in the day as well, but let's see. Let's see. That is going to be my Sunday, which has just started. It's 12:01, so I'm signing off. I'll see you tomorrow, and until then, I bid you adieu.